one of the things that I like about being fractional is the fact that you're always changing. You're always looking at different projects, different customers, different verticals. Each one has their own challenge. There are obviously a lot of similarities, but also a lot of things that are very unique and different, and every day looks a bit different.
All my clients so far has been through networking. I actually got a couple of inbound from doing newsletters on LinkedIn. Me and my co-founder, we've had some challenges in agreeing what we thought was the right way forward as well. So I decided, no, I need to exit this, which was super painful at the time. But people have asked me if I regret it, but I actually don't regret it at all. I regret how we did things.
Welcome to OFRAC, the podcast where top fractional leaders share their wins, struggles, and stories from the trenches. Hosted by Adir Ron. Welcome to OFRAC, the podcast where we dive into the world of fractional leadership, the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adir Ron, Fractional CMO, and my guest today is Mats Forsgren. Hi, Mats.
Hi, Adir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. So, Mats is a Swedish-born revenue architect with over 25 years of globetrotting sales leadership. From Stockholm and London to New York and Dublin, Mats have doubled turnovers at Blue Curve and pushed LinkedIn's Nordic business to 40% year-over-year growth. And today, Mats pilots GrowthGen, parachuting in as a fractional CRO to hardwire scrappy startups with repeatable pipeline. It's pretty accurate.
Yeah, no, exactly. I couldn't have said that better myself. So yeah, good intro.
Perfect. And I know we talked about your last name, so I gave the English pronunciation, which is Forsgren, but can you please share the Swedish pronunciation?
Yes, Forsgren.
Okay. Yes, that is not something I think I can do. So you were born in Sweden?
Yeah, correct.
And so I think that's a great icebreaker question, actually. You were born in Sweden, you've lived in Stockholm, in London, in New York, in Dublin, maybe a few other places as well. From a CRO perspective, which city taught you the toughest sales lesson? And what was that lesson?
Good question. I think US and New York, because they're so brutal. But it's an honesty there that, the amount of time I think I've called people and they just hang up on me, I never had that before. Having said that, they are more straight shooters. So, if you do have something that they like, they will talk to you. But if you don't, they'll just hang up. Whereas in other parts, particularly I would say in UK and also a bit in Sweden, they would maybe, I'll talk to you, but then nothing happens. So in a way, I actually prefer the fast no than the slow no.
Interesting. I noticed working a lot with US-based startups that cold calling is much more acceptable in the US, I think. But I think that's also kind of like a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it is considered more acceptable to just call someone and then cold call someone, but then they're more comfortable saying no, like you said.
Absolutely.
So and just hang up the phone on you. Okay, that's interesting. So again, Mats, thank you for joining me today. And excited to hear about your journey from Stockholm through LinkedIn to being a fractional CRO. So I call this section, How the Frac Did You Get Here?
So, I've been in sales and sales leadership roles throughout my career. I've spent a lot of time working with smaller companies. I had some exits, some failures, and then also worked with some bigger corporations like LinkedIn and Pluralsight. How I became a fractional was my last corporate role, which was for a little bit smaller company called Zero Health, which was in the well-being space. I was taken on as a CCO, so in charge of marketing, sales, and customer success. We were doing well, but we got investment from PE, and when they came in, a lot of things changed. So a lot of people ended up leaving, including myself and also the CEO in the end. So at that time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and this is about coming up to 2 years ago now. The job market wasn't amazing. I was a little bit fed up with the corporate world, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I had a good network of startups that, from my own startup journey here in Ireland, that I still connected to. And I started to get some questions from them. Hey, Mats, I got the product up and running, but I've been the only salesperson. I want to hire somebody. Where do I find that? How do I comp them? What kind of targets do I set? How do I coach them? All that kind of questions. And I remember one question from one founder say, I'm talking to an investor now. He's asking me about weighted pipe. What is that? So then when I heard that, I thought, there might be a business here. There might be a gap in the market. So I started doing a little bit just pro bono, just to get into it. But I was researching this kind of field, and I didn't know about fractional at the time, but I came across this word fractional. I find a guy in Italy called Matteo. He's been doing it for a while, and he was running a fractional school, actually. So I took that. It was good exercise, and then I decided, no, I'll give it a go. So that's this is about 1.5 years ago now.
Okay, that's so it is still fairly new. And
yeah.
So how do you see, kind of working fractional versus what you did before, in terms of how customers are, how your customers are kind of looking at it, how you look at it?
Yeah, and I should mention actually how I got into this. At the time, I started seeing a coach because I felt a little bit lost, and my wife, she is a coach, and she decided you need a coach. And that wasn't going to be her, but she recommended a coach to me, and what he was very good, and I would recommend anybody doing that as well. He kind of did have two paths. One was a corporate path, and one was doing something different, which we're not quite sure what that was. And we also tie that up to values. What's important to you, and what do you value out of life? And it became very clear that the fractional route was the one that was more linked to what my values were, and then I would be more effective in that role. So one of my strong values is freedom, and it's clear to me, and I know that when I am in the corporate world, I can't get the freedom that I want. It doesn't necessarily mean that I work less. It's just that I can decide when to work. If I want to work in the middle of the night, if I want to start at 5 o'clock, but I want to play tennis at lunch, I can do that. But which in a corporate world is not necessarily the way to do it.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. You were saying, talk about different customers. One thing that I do like a lot as well is that when you go into corporate world, you have your description. This is what you're meant to do. Here is the flip side. You actually go into the client and say, this is what I will do, and because this is what you need after the assessment you've done with them. So it's of course you have a boss, because they are paying you for what you do, but it's actually more you telling them what to do than the flip side, which I like.
I agree, and it really connects what you said about your values and how you see your life, and I feel like that's a common thread that I'm hearing with a lot of fractionals that I'm talking to here on the show and outside as well. And it's about freedom. It's about being able to choose who I want to work with, how I want to work with. I think it's also a lot about ownership and this sense of ownership. And I'm also hearing a lot of people talk about keeping fresh. When you're in a full-time, especially in corporate roles, the grind just gets to you. And I can say for myself that one of the things that I like about being fractional is the fact that you're always changing. You're always looking at different projects, different customers, different verticals. Each one has their own challenge. There are obviously a lot of similarities, but also a lot of things that are very unique and different, and every day looks a bit different. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. You don't get bored. I know when I've been in the corporate world that I have sometimes get bored, and there's no way I can get bored what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And what types of customers do you typically work with? Are there specific verticals, industries, regions, stages of companies?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and this took a while for me to and it's still evolving, I would say, but I think my sweet spot today is B2B. It tends to be tech, and it's founder led. So they have a product, they have revenue, but they want to scale. So it's been founder led sales up to now. They might have one person or two people that started to sell for them, but they want to scale. So that's where I kind of go in and help them on that journey. Geo-wise, I've had clients in Switzerland, Croatia, Sweden, UK, and Ireland. So it's kind of spread, but it's in Europe, not in US. So.
Okay. And so revenue-wise, is there a specific kind of like revenue stage that they're in?
$500,000 to $2 million revenue, an ARR, somewhere around that. It's not specific, but they need to be revenue generating, and they tend to be on a smaller scale. So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a bit about Superconnector. That's kind of shifting a bit. Can you tell me a bit about your work with Superconnectors?
Absolutely. It's a Dutch organization, as you probably know, and I got introduced to them by somebody somebody from LinkedIn, I remember. And I thought I really liked the concept that so what they do is they basically help startups being connected. So you have a startup and you might be, it's just one, if I knew somebody in that particular space, then, that would mean the world to us. So what they go around Europe, and also they go around all the world and offer and do some shows basically. And they have pitches then that the startup, they pitch their product, what they do, but also their critical ask. And then in the audience, then you have the Superconnectors, which are people like me with a big network. And you are actually pitching to help them. So the person with the best connecting person in their network to this particular critical ask then get some points, and then by the end of the evening, somebody win a bottle of wine or two. So it's a great. I've been to two events. I've been to one in Paris and one in Latvia. So great event. I mean, and you get to a certain stage in your life where we just want to give back. I've had to start up myself that in the end didn't work out, and I knew if I would have been connected, super connected, then things might have been worked out differently. So I'm just happy to help out, really. And also, through that event, I also got some clients in the end, which wasn't my aim, my kind of purpose, but it kind of ended up that way. I always find with networking in general, if you give, you're going to get back rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's true. But it's interesting because, you mentioned the power of a network and having this, kind of ability to schmooze and to open doors and connect with people. I think that, looking at your history and experience, for example, if I look at, eDesk, where you were vice president of strategic partnerships, feels like, that's a big part of your background and your history, this ability to, connect with people. And I think that's really interesting when you look at it from a fractional perspective, because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think again, at least in my perspective, a lot of fractional work, or not necessarily the work itself that you do as a chief of revenue, but the ability to build your network, to get more customers, more potential leads in the door as a fractional practitioner, is a lot around, that network ability. Do you see that?
And when I set out, I thought that I'm going to get clients through outreach and doing email campaigns, which I have done.
How did that work for you?
They haven't been successful. I think I got one. I got a lead that then didn't turn into a client. So no, all my clients so far has been through networking. I actually got a couple of inbound from doing newsletters on LinkedIn, so which is interesting. But that's in the later stage. In the beginning, it was all through networking or referrals.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I may. Yeah. Also, you mentioned that the part of network. One thing I think we as a superpower we have as Fractional is our network. So I've been asked several times when I'm in a position. So I'm a CRO, and it's obvious to me after a while in the organization that they maybe need a COO or a CMO, but they don't necessarily, the founder doesn't necessarily have the network, which I do. So I've been recommending a lot of people to that, which is, again, it's a superpower we have, and I'm happy to do that, of course, as well, because it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely I've seen, I think especially this combo of CMO and CRO is something that I'm seeing a lot in a lot of cases, where kind of one fractional pulls in another. So, okay, so going back to networks, I read a really interesting article a while ago around fractional practice, and it was full of tips around, like, if you're just starting out your fractional journey. I think one thing that I felt was like a really golden nugget there was that if you don't have a strong enough network, don't go fractional. What they said was that for at least for the first year, if not more, your 100% of your business and your clients will come from your direct first connection network. And then, like you said, you're starting to get some inbound now from LinkedIn newsletter, but that's at a later stage. So definitely echoing that. But I'm actually interested to hear about that LinkedIn newsletter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's funny because Matteo, who was the guy who did the fractional school, he strongly recommended me to do a newsletter, and I was dead against this. I said, I'm not going to do a newsletter. I will post some stuff on LinkedIn, but I said I'm not going to do a newsletter. And then I was also another ex-colleague of mine from LinkedIn called Hannah Larsson. She's big on. She's done a great career out of LinkedIn. Promoting brand and promoting brand awareness, and she also said, "Let's just do the newsletter." And she said interesting stats, like 95% that people that start newsletter don't follow through, but it's the one who does that they will see the ripe the benefit. So I started to do it. It felt a little bit awkward in the beginning, but now I actually enjoying it. So what I do is and I think most people that I talk to that create content, that's what happens. I'm going out with the dog, I go for a walk or whatever, I get an idea, I put it in my phone, and just there it is. And then, next day in the morning, I start to write about it. And then it takes a few days to kind of to perfect, if you like. But I don't, because that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought, okay, I'm going to start Monday morning and I'm going to write a newsletter. And it's empty, right? It's nothing.
You look at this blank, exactly. Google Doc or Word document, what the hell am I going to write about?
Yeah. So now I'm enjoying it. I do it every Tuesday morning, comes out, and it's, Matteo said this as well, actually. I try to write to the founders that are my target group, how can I help them in their journey to do that. I branch out a little bit depending on what's happening in the world, and if I've been to a conference, talk about this and that, right? But I try to get the message to them. How can I help them scale their business, basically?
Okay. So how long have you been doing the newsletter?
So the Tuesday I posted my 48th edition. So it's coming up to a year.
Almost, yeah, amazing. And you're saying that now you're actually starting to kind of hopefully reap the rewards as well.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I got 2 leads coming in, and they said, "Oh, I'm reading what," and these are people I didn't know, not from my network, and it's interesting because I remember both said, because I didn't know them. If people like my newsletter, I kind of then I can connect with them. But neither of those 2 people had liked them, and that was my first kind of. But you didn't like the newsletter, but they did like it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point about the compounding effect of just showing up, because I think that most people are the silent majority. They're consuming content, but they're not really engaging with it. They're not necessarily liking or commenting or sharing or saving, but still, I think that algorithms today are trained to also to surface you more content based on what you consume, even if you don't actively engage with it. So even if you're just, if your dwell time on posts on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on TikTok is big enough, that signals to the algorithm, hey, Mats cares about this or Adir cares about that. So they will surface more of that content. So I think just perseverance is becoming a very big virtue and a very a very strong thing that can help you, build your brand and eventually get more customers, or at least more leads.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch the subject up a bit, and let's talk about what I call your Frac'd Up moment or a horror story. And I know that you mentioned, you posted on LinkedIn a while ago about Clindox, which was your kind of like your baby, so to speak. So happy to hear some more on that.
Absolutely. So before this, I've been, I've been part of 2 exits for smaller companies. I was co-founder of one company, but I wasn't the main founder, if you like. I got this idea from Clindox, actually from my dad. So basically digitalize something. He had a business that was called Clindox, and I then did a completely different thing in the same industry, but I digitalized it, if you like. So we needed to build an app, needed to build a system, needed to have developers, etc., and then just basically start selling to pharmaceutical companies. We got funding. We got funding from Enterprise Ireland. We got funding from friends and family. We did have clients, but it just didn't scale the way we wanted to do. And in the end, after a long time, after putting a lot of money in, a lot of time, it was just time. I remember the moment when there was one particular client in Sweden that I was going after a long time, and they've been trialing it, and I just said, Mats, it just doesn't click all the boxes. And I thought, if we can't win these guys, this is never going to fly. Me and my co-founder, we've had some challenges in agreeing what we thought was the right way forward as well. So I decided, no, I need to exit this. Which was super painful at the time. People have asked me if I regret it, but I actually don't regret it at all. I regret how we did things, but I don't regret doing it because it was so much learning in that journey, and I met so many people. And so there's no regrets in that. Just tons of learning, basically. And it also, which I think was important for me, up to that, I've been working in companies, but nothing bigger company. The biggest company I ever worked in, I think, was 100 employees. And I was in charge of a division that was 15. So after that, I then joined LinkedIn after Clindox, and they kind of got me an insight to the corporate world, how good looks like, and because they are really good at doing certain things. Now, it's not for me, because after 2.5 years of doubling everything, it's just, what do I do now?
What's my next challenge?
Yeah, I crave the autonomy, which, in the end, you don't get. It's an amazing company. Don't get me wrong, but I needed to go through that, I think, for my journey to experience that kind of corporate culture.
I agree. And I think it also sometimes kind of like maybe a bit of a rebound, like kind of taking a relationship metaphor into the business life. Yeah. So, you've had your journey, you were very much invested in it. And then, now we kind of need something that's completely different to kind of clear the palette.
It was nice to get a big paycheck every month. So.
Yes, that always helps.
It does help.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, I can totally relate. Earlier in my career, I had somewhat of a similar journey, more in the service space. So I started a service company back in 2016. Back then, I called it CMO as a service, which I didn't really know the term. I don't want to claim I coined that phrase, but I was probably one of the earlier people to use that phrase. And no one really understood what that means, me included. And we kind of invented things as we went along, and we built it. I built it together with a partner to be a 10-people agency. And then right before COVID, we were like, okay, service industry sucks, and it's hard work, and we want to shift into product. And we started moving, all of our efforts and all of our income to focus on building a product company. We had our first MVP. We had our first customer signing, and then COVID hit. And within 2 weeks, the business was obliterated. Wow. Like, we were living off of client work to fuel the growth of the product side. And then we lost 80% of the clients within 2 weeks. So we had to let go of everyone. And then eventually everything crashed and burned. And then but I don't regret it. Like you said, I think there's regrets on things that could have been done differently, could have been done better, but 100% not regretting anything of that experience. And I think that there were so many lessons learned there. And also on the rebound side, so when that happened, I jumped again to be a CMO at a different company, full time, like you said, solid paycheck, pays the bills, breathe a bit, kind of relax from that entrepreneurial journey in a way. And then it took me a couple of years to kind of go back and becoming a fractional, which happened last year. Because I felt like, okay, now I'm ready. Like I've learned my lessons, got a bit more of gray hair, a little less hair on my head.
I was going to say
but older, hopefully wiser, hopefully more humble, and with a lot of lessons learned from that previous journey. So I 100% relate to that.
It's funny as well. I remember talking to my coach, and because I was kind of dead against going initially to doing something by myself again, because I felt I've been burned with Clindox. I thought I'm not going down that route again. But he said something interesting. He said, okay, look, if you take a step back, look at Mats now and look at Mats before Clindox. Who is better suited to set up a new company? It's obvious, right?
Easy question.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I know it's we talked about a Frac'd Up moment, but I actually want to reference another interesting thing that I saw you write about a while ago, which was owning up to numbers, or more I would say inheriting impossible numbers. And I know that's a Frac'd Up moment for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other fractional leaders as well. So just to kind of set the stage, I think you were talking about like coming into a fractional engagement and the CEO gives you like a revenue target and says, this is where we need to go. And you said, okay, let's do it. And then as you started diving into it, you realized this was just an inflated number that the CEO thought the investors are going to like. And obviously, if that number isn't reasonable and is not built on any well thought of plan or analysis, then it's just going to be unreachable.
Yeah, it was fun because I'm part of the pavilion, and so I was doing a CRO school there, which is a great university, technology university school, a great course basically. And one of the on one of the course days we were talking just about this. You need to challenge the number, and I mean you need to have guts to do it because you're in a job. Because we were all kind of really you're in a job interview and you're going to challenge, but their kind of counter of it was that if you do it, if you are a proper CEO, I say proper CEO, but a CEO that you want to work with, he or she will acknowledge that and they will respect you for doing that. And it also, you don't want to end up, owning a number that you can't deliver on anyhow, because you're only going to be there to 6 to 9 months. So what's the point? It's better to challenge the number and get some more data, trying to figure out how did they get to that number. If that doesn't add up in your world, then you challenge that, and then you see how that conversation goes. If you agree on something, then everybody's happy. If you don't, then maybe it's not the right company to work for anyhow. And I think that's great advice. I didn't do that in this case, and it ended up not being the right company to work for. And I wish I would have done. Because, I mean, it's two ways. There's two outcomes. One is that you agree on a number that you think is attainable and everybody's happy, as I said, or you don't work that, but then at least you're not going to join something that's not going to last anyhow. So it have that.
Exactly.
It's just challenge the number and also ask how did they get to that number. I think it's important. So because sometimes, to be truth, it's just taken from thin air.
Yeah. And I think from the CMO's perspective, kind of like the other side of the coin, I've had occasions where the sales numbers were, very well thought of, very well built between CEO and CRO, but then, CFO jumps in and says, okay, this is the marketing budget that I think makes sense based on industry benchmarks or based on our runway. Okay. And then as the CMO, I get called in and they're like, okay, so here's our growth goals, here's our, our ARR and our sales numbers, and here's your budget. And the gap is just insane. You're like, okay, how is this calculation made up of, like you said, and then, all the sales numbers add up because it's a very, very solid plan that's well built. But on the other hand, no one really thought of, what does it take to execute on this plan? So even if our sales conversion numbers are good, did anyone ever stop to look historically at CAC? Or, how much is going to cost us to get a lead? Or if we want to do conferences and events this year, how many conferences can we afford? And then suddenly you realize that there's this huge gap. And then just like you said, okay, yeah, I can sign off on this plan, but we're never going to actually reach those numbers. So should I sign those numbers? The answer is 99% of the time, no. And I also think that, my belief is that one of the strongest, most important currencies for someone who's a fractional is their reputation. Mm-hmm. And if you just say yes to a plan without double, triple checking the numbers, you might end up with some more revenue in your pocket, but that's not going to be a happy customer down the line.
Very true.
And like you said, like 6 to 9 months, maybe even less, because again, the numbers don't add up. You end up leaving very soon. That's not going to be someone who recommends you to their network. Again, we talked about the power of networks. Okay, so I think that was a very interesting double Frac'd Up moment, actually. So let's kind of move over to our next part, which is a quickfire round. So I'm going to ask you a few quick questions and be happy to hear your thoughts and takes. So first question, let's debunk a myth, or how I like to call it, a frac or fiction. And I've heard this when I was talking to some founders, actually, in an event recently here in Amsterdam, and we're talking about fractionals. And I said, there's fractional CMOs and CFOs and CROs. And then one of the founders there said, I don't trust a fractional CRO. They can't truly own the numbers.
Yeah, that's definitely a myth. And sometimes I've seen, okay, but you're just one of those consulting guys and coming in and kind of tell us what to do. Whereas you 100%, if you're a proper fractional CRO, you do own the number. The only difference is that you're not there necessarily in the roles every day. But my argument is that I don't need to be there every day because the organization isn't that size, and that's the beauty for them to have a fractional, and that's why it works for us as well. So, but you 100% own the number.
Okay. What is the number one tool that you swear by in your toolkit? And that can be a process or a tool, a subscription, service, whatever.
I would say it's my Remarkable. I don't know if you've missed my digital notepad. It's been with me for 5 years now, and I take a lot of notes. And before I had this digital one, I just stacked up notepads and notepads, which I never went back to. Now I have. There you go.
I have just a couple here on my desk. Yes.
Now I have everything digitalized because I still like to write, and now everything is digitalized and stored up and backed up. It's something that I really, really like.
I've been hearing about Remarkable for years, but I never made that plunge.
The good thing about it, if again I don't get money for it, is that because some of them, iPads or something you can write on. There's a lot of stuff going on. Here is nothing going on. It's a notepad. That's what it is.
Yeah, simplicity and focus. Awesome. Okay, what's your definition of a dream client versus a nightmare client?
A dream client for me would be somebody that they know what they're good at, and they also know what they're not good at. So in my case, there will be a founder who has a great product, got it to a certain stage, but they know they are not that person to build a revenue team. They have that vision. They said, I'm good at this and this, but I'm not good at that. That's why I need help. And I think in nightmare it's the opposite too. And the thing is, I haven't really necessarily have those clients because they tend to think that they're so good at everything, so they're not gonna need you. So that if they're not coachable, if they're not willing to listen, then that becomes a nightmare client.
Yeah. I agree. I'm glad to hear that you didn't have any nightmare client, and I hope that it stays that way. Unfortunately, I think a lot of fractionals, especially early on, don't have their radar so much in sync, so to speak. And when you're looking for those first clients, you tend to make a mistake and hire despite of the glaring red flags and alarms, just because you want an extra client, you want another revenue source or another company in your portfolio, and then you end up hiring, signing up with the wrong customer, and then immediately after you sign up, you're like, oh, this was a mistake.
No, and I have done that. The example I have there is that I got some clients initially, and then suddenly, I wasn't. One thing is the fractional, you do need to create pipe all the time, and I didn't. So then I had a little gap, and then I went to a network event, and I met this lady it's a learning company for B2C, and she was very keen to sign me up, and I said, I'm not sure, I will do B2B later. So I ended up signing up, but it was not the right decision. It was a nightmare client, and it wasn't a good thing. It took a long time to get paid and all kind of sorts of stuff. So yeah, that my mistake, because I shouldn't have signed up.
We all made those mistakes. Okay, last quickfire question. Where do you see the future of fractional?
I think it's increasing. I think people are getting more I say used to it, but people are getting aware that this actually exists. We're both in Europe. Here, I find it often in educational sales, because a lot of people that I speak to, they're not aware of this. They have a playbook that, this is what I need to do, I need to have a full, and then you come in and disrupt that a little bit. In US is different. I think it's more common use case in US to use fractional, but I see it's changing. I don't see it's gonna take over from full-time employees, but I think it's becoming more common for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Europe is still a few steps behind on that front. And I think the question that I hear most is not what do you do as a fractional? It's like, what is a fractional CMO? So it is, like you said, very much of an educational sale, 100%. Okay, so we're coming up towards the end of our episode. And my final question for you today is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's an aspiring leader, someone who's thinking about going fractional, what would that advice be?
I would say, make sure it's what you want to do. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for everyone. And if you do go down the route, make sure you don't forget about creating pipe. Me as a salesperson, that's generally what I do, but I missed out a lot of times because I have, too much work to do. So I haven't had time to look after the pipe. But the pipe, it's fractional. Often that means that it will end. So you do need to create pipe, and that is constant. And if you maybe a COO or a CFO, you might not be that comfortable creating pipe. So you need to think about that before you go down this route.
Spoken like a true CRO. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for us for today. Mats, thank you so much for joining me today. And it was lovely to have you, and it was a great conversation. If someone wants to find you to follow up, so LinkedIn and then your LinkedIn newsletter, right? I'll make sure that both will appear on our show notes.
You can follow me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn newsletter comes out every Tuesday. It's called Sales Engine Newsletter. That's where I hang out.
Perfect.
And thank you, Adi. Thank you for inviting me. Great conversation.
Of course, I'll make sure to add the links to both in the show notes. And thank you for listening to our conversation today. If you liked it, please subscribe, leave a review, like, share, follow, all the things that people ask at the end of episodes. Again, Mats, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.